you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter.
She finished her solo at the Apollo Theater, walked off stage to thunderous applause, went home to rest before the evening show, and never woke up. She was 27. She had just scored her biggest hit in 5 years.
And I'll be at your side forevermore.
That is how fast it can end. One night, you are standing in the brightest spotlight soul music has to offer. The next, your name is a footnote, a coma, a headline nobody wanted to write, 10 artists, 10 moments when everything was finally working.
Last week my life had meaning.
And 10 falls that came faster and crueler than anyone watching could have predicted. This is R&B Pulse Track, and these are the stories the hit records never told you. Number 10, Jackie Wilson, Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher. 1967.
And I'll be at your side forevermore.
He was already a legend before most of these other names ever cut a record. They called him Mr. Excitement, and on stage, he earned every syllable of it. The splits, the spins, the way he could make 3,000 people scream from a single held note. By the mid-1970s, he was still filling rooms, still moving like a man half his age, still owed a fortune by the very label that made him famous. Then came One Ordinary Night in New Jersey, the kind of gig he had played 1,000 times before. He hit the stage, started into one of his signature numbers, and collapsed mid-performance. His heart had stopped delivering oxygen to his brain. He fell, and for the audience watching in horror, the show simply never resumed.
I finally found you. Yes, that one.
He did not die that night. He lingered instead, locked in a state somewhere between presence and absence for 9 more years. His longtime label owed him hundreds of thousands of dollars in royalties he never lived to collect, tied up in fraud charges that outlasted his ability to even understand them. Elvis Presley, who idolized his stage presence, quietly helped cover his medical bills. Friends organized benefit concerts to keep the lights on. He passed away in 1984, having spent nearly a decade unable to speak, sing, or stand on the stage that had once belonged entirely to him. The most electric performer of his generation ended his life in near silence, and the silence is what most people now remember, more than the sound that made him famous. But if you think a heart attack on a stage is the cruelest way a career can end, wait until you hear what depression did to the next name on this list. Number 9, Donny Hathaway, The Closer I Get to You, with Roberta Flack. 1978. He could play virtually anything: piano, organ, arranger's pen, perfect pitch, all wrapped into one restless, classically trained mind. Critics called his voice one of the greatest of his generation, capable of aching tenderness one moment and gospel fire the next. But behind the music, he was fighting a war almost nobody around him fully understood. Severe clinical depression, undiagnosed for years, that periodically pulled him out of the world entirely. In 1978, after years out of the spotlight, he reunited with a longtime singing partner for a duet that shot straight to the top of the R&B charts. It looked like the comeback everyone had hoped for, proof that his gift hadn't dimmed, that the man behind some of soul's most beloved songs was back for good. Then, on a January night in 1979, while working on a new album in a New York hotel, he went out a 15th floor window. The death was ruled a suicide, though family members and friends have disputed that conclusion for decades, pointing to his ongoing struggles with mental illness as a force largely outside his control. He was 33 years old, at the exact moment his comeback was proving itself real. The song that brought him back to the charts became, almost overnight, a eulogy nobody had time to prepare. Decades later, artists from Stevie Wonder to Justin Timberlake still cite him as untouchable, proof that talent was never the thing that failed him. The next story on this list proves that a voice this powerful isn't always enough to outrun the very industry that built it. Number 8. David Ruffin, My Whole World Ended the Moment You Left Me. 1969.
Last week my life had meaning.
His voice carried one of Motown's most beloved groups through its biggest hits. Gritty, aching, unmistakable, the kind of tenor that made you believe every word of heartbreak he sang. But inside the group, tension was building for years. He wanted more money, more credit, more control. When the label wouldn't budge, he walked.
When yesterday is all I see.
His solo career started red hot. His very first single shot into the pop and R&B top 10, and for a moment it looked like he had proven every doubter wrong. But what followed was a slow, brutal unraveling. Cocaine, which had quietly shadowed him even during his glory years with the group, tightened its grip the moment the group's structure and its accountability disappeared. He clawed his way back more than once. A surprise reunion with two old groupmates and a pair of unlikely allies, a blue-eyed soul duo who adored his work, landed him a Grammy nomination and a spot at Live Aid in front of millions. Induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame followed in 1989, the ultimate validation after 2 decades of chaos.
Tell me, baby, where did I go wrong?
But the addiction never let go. In 1991, at 50 years old, he collapsed in a Philadelphia crack house. He was dropped off at a hospital hours later by someone who never identified himself. He died shortly after, his real identity confirmed only through FBI fingerprint records, tagged in the morgue simply as John Doe. The next entry's collapse happened in front of thousands of people, in real time, with no warning at all. Number 7. Teddy Pendergrass, Turn Off the Lights, 1979.
A romantic groove, yeah.
By the late 1970s, he was the undisputed king of what fans called bedroom soul, a baritone so deep and physically commanding that he filled arenas with ladies-only concerts, where men were turned away at the door and women threw lingerie onto the stage mid-performance. 5 consecutive platinum albums, a solo career built almost entirely on raw, hypnotic vocal power.
Let's take a shower.
He had started as a drummer, sitting quietly behind the kit of a Philadelphia vocal group, before one electric night, when he jumped from behind the drums to the front microphone, uninvited and unannounced. The group's leader took one listen and moved him permanently to lead vocals. Within a few years, that drummer was filling stadiums under his own name, the most physically commanding voice in R&B. Then, on a March night in 1982, his Rolls-Royce ran off Lincoln Drive in Philadelphia and struck a tree and a pole. He survived, but the crash left him paralyzed from the waist down, his spinal cord severed, his body never to walk a stage again the way it once had.
Show you.
He did not disappear. He returned to recording, building an entirely new chapter of his career from a wheelchair, proving his voice had survived even what his body could not. But the image fans remember most, the bedroom soul king commanding arenas with nothing but his presence, belonged entirely to the years before that single devastating night on a quiet Philadelphia road. The next story belongs to a voice so famous it became one half of one of music's most legendary duets, and so fragile it couldn't survive what came next. Number 6. Tammi Terrell, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, with Marvin Gaye. 1967.
If you need me, call me, no matter where you are.
Her voice is etched into some of the most beloved duets in soul music history, paired with a partner so famous that their names are still spoken as one. Together, they delivered a streak of hits so massive that they were voted the #1 R&B duo in the country. She was 22 years old, and by every measure, only just getting started. Then, on an October night in 1967, mid-performance at a college in Virginia, she collapsed directly into her singing partner's arms. The audience gasped, unsure if it was theater or emergency. It was the second one. Doctors soon discovered a malignant tumor on the right side of her brain.
If you ever need a helping hand,
What followed was nearly 3 years of agony hidden behind a continuing release schedule. She underwent 8 surgeries. Her label kept issuing new singles credited to the duo, several stitched together from vocals she had recorded before she ever got sick. By the final year of her life, she had lost her sight, lost her hair, weighed barely 90 pounds, and was confined to a wheelchair, while songs bearing her name still climbed the charts as if nothing had happened. She died in March 1970, a month before her 25th birthday. Her singing partner was so devastated that he stopped performing live for 3 years, and the album he made in the aftermath of her death became one of the most influential records in soul music history. Her own gift, cut down at its absolute peak, never received the chance to evolve beyond the duets that made her famous. If you think losing a voice that young was unbearable, wait until you hear about the teenager whose stardom vanished almost as fast as it appeared. We're officially halfway through this countdown, and if the first 5 names taught us anything, it's that the music industry rarely warns its biggest stars before everything changes. If you're new here, welcome. R&B Pulse Track exists to dig up exactly these kinds of stories, the human moments hiding behind the records you already love. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, because the next 5 names on this list include a teenage idol gone too soon, a Grammy winner undone by a single decision, and a voice so quietly tragic that most fans have never even heard her name. Let's keep going. Back into the countdown. Number 5. Frankie Lymon, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? 1956. He was barely a teenager when his soaring, impossibly pure voice carried his group's very first single to the top of the charts. A song so massive, it became one of the defining records of an entire era. Disc jockeys started calling the group by his name alone. For a moment, this barely teenage singer was one of the most famous voices in America. But the fame came with no roadmap for handling it. He left the group within a year, chasing a solo career the label assumed would simply continue the momentum. It didn't. His solo singles stalled. A controversial on-air dance with a white teenage girl on a national broadcast got the entire show canceled, and with it, one of his few remaining platforms. By his late teens, he had already become a cautionary tale rather than a continuing story. What followed was over a decade of decline, failed comeback attempts, a heroin addiction that had quietly taken hold during his teenage stardom and never let go. Marriages that were never fully legal, relationships built on chaos rather than stability, and increasingly rare moments back in a recording studio that no longer wanted him the way it once had. He was found dead from a heroin overdose in his grandmother's bathroom in 1968. He was 25 years old, a number that meant he had spent more years chasing his first hit than he had spent enjoying it. He was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a tribute to a voice that defined an era before that era had even finished beginning. The next entry's downfall wasn't caused by addiction or tragedy. It was caused by a single, controversial decision made by the very label that built him. Number 4. Billy Paul, Me and Mrs. Jones, 1972.
Me and Mrs. Jones.
His one massive crossover hit was so culturally dominant that decades later, people still recognize the opening notes instantly. It was a Grammy winner, a chart topper, a signature so powerful that it nearly overshadowed everything else this gifted jazz soul vocalist had spent years building. For one shining year, he was untouchable. His label, eager to capitalize, rushed a follow-up single into the marketplace. It was meant as a statement of racial pride and self-reliance. Instead, it was widely misread as confrontational, and radio programmers who had embraced his crossover hit quietly began pulling back. Years later, another of his recordings sparked outright controversy over its supposedly explicit lyrics, drawing public condemnation from a prominent civil rights leader.
We got a thing.
None of his albums ever charted as high again. Only one more single would even reach the R&B top 10 for the rest of his recording career. He continued releasing music for decades, building a devoted following overseas, particularly in Brazil and the UK. But the mainstream crossover audience that had embraced him so completely simply never returned.
Mrs. Jones.
Decades later, he sued his own former label and producers over unpaid royalties, and a jury ultimately awarded him a substantial settlement, vindication that arrived only after the commercial damage was permanently done.
Mrs. Jones.
He spent the rest of his life as living proof that a label's choice of which song to release next can matter just as much as the talent behind the microphone. The next story belongs to a performer whose own label conflicts pulled her toward Broadway, and eventually toward something far darker. Number 3. Phyllis Hyman, You Know How to Love Me, 1979. Her voice was a low, expansive contralto that critics struggled to compare to anyone else recording at the time. She broke through with a string of R&B hits, crossed over into club and dance charts, and seemed destined to become one of the defining vocalists of her generation. For a moment, every door in the industry appeared to be opening for her at once. Then her relationship with her label soured. Contract disputes paused her recording career for years at a stretch, even as her talent remained undeniable. She pivoted to Broadway, earning a Tony nomination for a musical revue built on Duke Ellington's music, proving her range extended far beyond the R&B chart that had first discovered her. She toured, she recorded guest vocals, she kept working, but the sustained solo stardom that once seemed inevitable never fully materialized. Behind the public performances, she was privately battling worsening mental health struggles that intensified as industry setbacks piled up. Friends and collaborators noticed the strain, but the severity of what she was carrying remained largely hidden from the audiences who loved her voice. In June 1995, at the age of 45, she died by suicide in her New York apartment. The news devastated a music community that had watched her talent for over 2 decades without ever fully understanding the toll those decades had taken. Her songs remain staples of quiet storm radio today. A voice still adored, attached to a story still not widely known. The next entry's collapse came from something far more literal, a needle, an addiction, and a label that simply gave up trying to market her. Number 2, Esther Phillips, What a Difference a Day Makes, 1975.
24 little hours from the sun.
She was a 13-year-old prodigy when she first scored a string of #1 R&B hits, billed as a child star with a voice that sounded decades older than she was. But the hits dried up almost as fast as they arrived, and by her mid-teens, a heroin addiction had already taken root, one that would shadow nearly every chapter of the rest of her career.
Since you said you were mine.
She vanished for years at a time, cycling through rehabilitation stays, minor labels, and false starts. Then, in the early 1970s, a partnership with a visionary jazz producer reignited everything. A searing recording about addiction and depression earned her a Grammy nomination, and when she lost, the eventual winner felt so strongly she deserved it that she walked over and physically handed her the trophy. In 1975, she scored her biggest hit in over a decade with a disco-tinged reimagining of a decades-old standard. It cracked the Pop Top 20, the R&B Top 10, and turned into the best-selling album of her career. She performed it on national television. For the first time in 20 years, it looked like her story might finally have a happy second act. It didn't last. Restless and underserved by her label, she left for new representation that never recaptured the magic, and her addiction reasserted itself with a vengeance. She spent her final years scraping by on small, independent releases before dying of liver and kidney failure in 1984 at just 48 years old.
Before me, yeah. Skies above, I can't be.
Proof that even the most triumphant comeback can't always outrun the thing that derailed you the first time. And now, we arrive at the artist whose collapse may be the cruelest and the least remembered of them all. Number 1, ZZ Hill, Down Home Blues, 1982.
And everybody's having a good time.
He spent over 2 decades grinding on the Chitlin circuit, smoky southern roadhouses where the crowds were small, the pay was thin, and nobody from a major label ever came through the door. He recorded for a string of small imprints that folded almost as fast as they signed him. By his mid-40s, the music industry had quietly written him off as a journeyman, talented enough to keep booking, not special enough to break through.
You know what's going through my mind.
Then, in 1980, he signed with Malaco Records in Jackson, Mississippi, and made an album that nobody predicted would do anything. Down Home Blues stayed on the Billboard Soul chart for 92 consecutive weeks, a record. Overnight, his popularity surpassed B.B. King and Bobby Bland. A man who had spent 20 years playing near empty rooms was suddenly headlining every stage he stepped on.
Oh man, go wanna find.
He was 48 years old and had never been this famous. He kept touring relentlessly, understanding better than most what it cost to finally reach this point. In February 1984, while on the road at the absolute peak of his career, his car was involved in an accident. He was injured, but he kept going. He gave his last concert on April 23, 1984, at the Longhorn Ballroom in Dallas, the same city where he had started playing clubs as a young man, with nothing but a voice. 4 days later, a blood clot that had formed in his leg after the crash killed him. The Blues Foundation had just named him Blues Vocalist of the Year. His follow-up album was already in stores. And a man who had spent 20 years earning the right to be called a legend died before he had lived 2 full years inside that word.